Hey everyone, I'm really excited to get to today's show to you. This is probably one of the deepest and most impactful discussions I've been a part of, and the alignment and synergies between what we try to talk about, but then how Brook conveyed this and just articulated his stories and his vulnerability throughout to have a real impact. I think you're absolutely going to love this episode. You need to learn more about Brook. We'll talk about that more later in the discussion, but just the understanding of what we own versus what we should surrender. What is self-leadership versus transformational leadership, and the different phases we might go through and how we know when we're there or when we should make the move. And ultimately, the different purposes for our life and how we can make those purposes bigger and bigger. We had a great discussion on this. Again, really pretty deep and eye-opening, and I appreciate it. I love to get into it. And Brook was really vulnerable, and I appreciated that. So definitely check this one out. Listen to the end. There's a lot of great wisdom throughout. Check out Brook. Learn more about him. This was great. You are going to love this. Hello and welcome to the Purpose Matrix. I'm Phil Moeller. I'm very excited for today's guest, Brook Cupps. Brook, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Phil. Appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. Brook and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago. We got connected, and just as I got to know and looked into Brook more and more, just a great all around guy. So first, head basketball coach for Centerville, but that's just scratching the surface. So author of 2 different books, Surrender the Outcome and The Score That Matters. Co-authored one of them with Ryan Hawk. Focused really a lot of his time on not just coaching basketball teams. I'll say he's a coach by nature, but he's coaching in the corporate world, business leaders. In his school, he's doing leadership development and leadership training. So he is, and really he focuses on the process over the outcome. We'll talk about that for sure. But just all around great guy and doing some great things. Spending a lot of time on the Learning Leader program with some other influential leaders in the area, in the Dayton, Ohio market, but also broader than that. And just focused on having an impact, which I love, and leveraging what he has learned through coaching to try to have an impact on so many other people. So, Brook, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, and really how did you get it? How do you shift from coach to leadership coach beyond the court? How did that transpire?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of been around basketball. My dad was a teacher. My mom was a bus driver. So I've been around school and education my whole life. Started out coaching right out of college, came back and coached for my high school coach, Dave Zeller, who was a longtime coach at Piqua. And then he was at Graham, who I played for. And then I came back, coached with him for a year, and then kind of took over the head coaching job when he retired from there. And, my first, I would say 7 or 8 years of coaching, I pretty much did things just like everybody else did, trying to figure out who I was. I was really just a cheap imitation of everybody that had coached me, and just had kind of a pivotal moment where I realized I needed to either change the way I looked at coaching and what I was doing, or I needed to stop coaching altogether. And the situation I wrote about in Surrender the Outcome, but I got frustrated with my daughter and knocked a popcorn bowl out of her hands. I mean, I can still see the situation now. But what it did for me is it gave me perspective, and it completely changed the way I viewed coaching. I viewed it prior to that basically as an outcome-based zero-sum game. Either I won or I lost. That meant you were better than me or I was better than you. Everything was a comparison. And then after that, I transitioned. It wasn't immediate for sure, but I transitioned into much more of a process base, really thinking about how I wanted to impact the people that I was leading. So at that time, it was the kids I was coaching, my kids at home, my family. What did I want my impact on them to be? Really kind of defining my purpose and reason for coaching. And that led me to, a lot of different things now. I went from teaching math, taught geometry, advanced math, calculus for a while. Then when I moved down to Centerville, I did that while I was at Graham. And then when I moved down to Centerville, I taught some different math classes, but eventually I wrote a leadership class and presented it. I was using it with kind of all the different captains of different sports teams. It was really stuff that we had started doing while I was at Graham with our teams. And then that turned into a full-time leadership class, which I taught We were one of the first schools around to offer that, where that's what I taught. And that was incredible because I mean, not many kids are using a Pythagorean theorem after they get out of high school, right? Or like
right.
solving quadratic equations. But when you start talking to kids about their purpose and why they do what they do, and what values drive their decisions, and what values are real and which ones are aspirational, and which ones do they really follow. And when you start getting into that stuff, now you're talking about stuff that actually matters all the time and applies to everyone, regardless of their job, their sport, their position, their role in life. So that kind of led me to that stuff. So
I have 8 or 10 different directions. I'm trying to figure out which direction to take this first. The first thing I'll say is I had the opportunity. So the school we live in, Marion Local, a young teacher started a leadership class 2 or 3 years ago. I had the opportunity to speak at that. And I'll just say, if you're an educator, if you're in the educational system, if you're a coach in any way, if you can get a leadership class or a teacher, anybody that can come in and do a leadership class, because, I just got off a different discussion where we talked about life skills and job skills. And look, education and math and those things are important. I am not diminishing that at all. Life skills are going to be the differentiator for these kids. That is absolutely the case. And leadership specifically within life skills is going to be the differentiator. So first of all, congratulations and thanks, Brooks. The other thing I was just going to say, I didn't say it in the intro. The way Brooke and I got connected is insane through his daughter and just all kinds of things. And then Graham, I have a coworker that taught or worked under Brooke, and there's all kinds of crazy connections, which is a whole different story. And like, okay, there's a reason for us to be connected here. But I want to talk about surrender the outcome. And I want to talk about what that means and the pivotal moment you had when you started to shift towards that. And you talk about this in the Score That Matters at the beginning of it, but you won a state championship in 2021, but you talk about that was 10 years in the making, and it was an outcome, right? That you say surrender the outcome, but it probably didn't feel like that in the moment. But also, you've been focused on this process-oriented training and development and coaching for, I think, a decade at the time. Did you question that? Because you were getting the results probably in the people, in the kids, and who you were coaching, but maybe tell me about the results you were getting on the court and how long did that take, I guess, to transfer? And were you really able to surrender it? Were you really able to separate from the outcomes you were getting?
Yeah, not initially. I mean, I think it did take time, and but honestly, we did win more, even though we weren't winning like state championship after state championship. We were definitely maximizing our teams. Like we could feel at the end of the year that was the best we could get out of our guys. Sometimes we won, sometimes we lost, but our guys were playing at the optimal level of competition. And, in a sport that's tough, that, only 5 guys play, the camaraderie and the relationships on our team were rich and deep. You start appreciating other things. And I think that is what kind of kept me going, kept spurring me on to stay down that path, even though it didn't immediately result in the state championship. But by that time, when I had made that switch, I had stopped defining stuff as like that being the success. So the state championship was just a byproduct of whatever happened. The story I tell all the time in the state championship game, we're up 1 with 5 seconds left or something. And the other team has the ball under their basket on baseline out of bounds. So if they score, they win. Right. And they call a timeout, and our guys come over to the bench. And at that point, we're huddled with our coaches, but I just hear our guys, all they're saying is what we decided on as the goal and the purpose to start the season. They're not talking about, you got to switch this, you got to switch that. They're just talking about, the goal that we set at the start of the season, and they were trusting that to get them there. Right. And so that idea, the mindset had switched from just trying to win the game to just believing in the process that you set, following through on it, and taking what happens from that.
Can you share what that goal was at the beginning of the season?
Yeah, I wish I could. I can't remember it right now. I was going to say it, and I got it because we
That's
set
okay.
a new one every year. I didn't put you on the
spot, but my suspicion is it was a process-oriented goal
that you
can control, right, and not win the state championship. The goal was not win the state championship. The goal was, hey, this is how, this is who we are. This is our identity. These are our values, and this is how we are going to act.
Yeah. It was attack opportunities with purpose. That was the goal that our guys set at the beginning of the year. Attack opportunities with purpose. And so we used it all the time throughout the year. Our guys would, coming into a practice, coming into a meeting. But when our guys were coming off the floor, our guys on the bench were just going, attack the opportunity. And it was like, you step back when they went out on the court, there was like a feeling of like, all right, we're good. Like whatever happens, we're good.
I don't know what it is about this discussion, bro, but you got me going here. I got chills, like just the directness, the clarity of how you're talking. This is fantastic. So I want to talk about the process. So there's the outcome. The outcome is feedback, but we build this process, and you talk about how we do that. And I want you to talk to business leaders. I want you to talk to administrators and teachers. I want you to talk to other coaches. I want you to talk to mid-level managers. If we have a team that we're leading and, we're just talking about results and scores and records and sales revenue, how do we need to shift that?
Well, I mean, I think any type of leadership starts with self-awareness. I think we have to know who we are and have great clarity in who we are, because I think the process is tied to your values. At least they are for me. I always say, I'm not saying this is all right. I'm not saying it's the best way. I'm just saying this is how it's worked for me. And I've seen it work for a lot of other people. But I think your process is just married to your core values. And the deep work and the uncomfortable reflection and thoughts on why you believe the things that you believe. And when you uncover and really identify the values that drive your actions, then I think you're on the right steps to creating a process that you can follow and you can trust to be able to go to sleep at night and be like, yep, that's the best I had. Yep.
How do you build on your teams each year? Do you have this is our program core values, or is the team involved in that process every year and they might change a little bit the words, or how do you do that?
Yeah. So for our basketball program, the core value, my core values are the program's core values. Now we've worked with some businesses where that's not the case. If there's an executive board, then we'll bring a group together. We'll have them share their value. But I think it has to be, even in that situation, it has to be a combination or a culmination of the values of the people that are leading. If you're just choosing values that you think they need and you think are important, but they're not really in your heart, you're never going to follow through with them at the level that you need to. So the values in our program are my values. They're very personal to me. So when I see a kid struggling with toughness, I see that as that's setting that kid up for failure for the rest of his life. So it's important for me to challenge it, to fix it, to acknowledge it when it's there and to confront it when it's not, right? And same thing with passionate, unified, and thankful. So those are driving, I drive those because they're that important to me. And when I'm working with businesses or companies that maybe don't have a single leader that started the company or something, then I think you've got to find the integration of those things. But if it's just my company, I'm running it, I think that's the best part of me. That's God created me that way. That's the best thing I can give you. That's the best thing I can give my guys is to help them be more tough, more passionate, more unified, and more thankful in their life. If I do that, a lot of that other stuff just kind of takes care of itself. I got to know what I'm talking about with basketball. I got to know how to, fill out the form and all that kind of stuff. But really, it becomes secondary.
Right. Well, I think for so many small teams, businesses, the starting point is figure out your process to create. First of all, you should know your own core values, no matter what. So individually, anybody, if that's your family, if that's your team, if that's your coaching or teaching, whatever it is, like, what do you stand for? And I love that. I've never heard that before, but the best thing I can give anybody else, you said your team, but the best thing I can give anybody else is what I strongly believe in, what I'm passionate about, my core values. Really, and to me, it's the inner work, but it's really the process of identifying your core values is the process of figuring out who you really are. And I think that process is very, very important to figure out who you are, because then it helps you be able to share that with other people. If you're leading a team and you don't have core values identified, I would strongly encourage you to say, hey, let's get together. You know, there's the one thing core values. Gary Keller has a stack of different words you could use. You can pick. There's different, you can just Google it or search it. And there's different ways to do it, but just create them. You can't get the process wrong. If you get it wrong, you moved in the right direction, do it again next year or do it again in 6 months from now, but just go through that process. So now we know who we think we are. We've started the process. We have kind of core values for ourselves or our team or whoever we're leading. So once we've done that, what's the next step? What are we doing after that? And this is the thing I think most people either neglect to do or don't see the value in. But you got to identify what the behaviors are that relate to those values. We call them critical behaviors, but I'll just use me for example. So tough for me is positive body language. And so when I go through that process, I think about, okay, if I want somebody to be tough, what do I always expect out of them? And when I first thought about that, I just said, show up. You know, tough guys just show up all the time, over and over and over. And then, you know, so I had somebody walk into the weight room moping and barely alive. And I was like, well, there ain't nothing tough about that. They got out of bed, but that was it. And so for me, positive body language precedes any tough action, decision, conversation. At some point, you got to be like, all right, I'm going. Right? That's for you specifically or for anyone? That's
for me. That's how I think of tough. And if somebody else has tough, they might think of, you know, different ways. But I have to define that because this is what is going to drive my process. So for me, it's positive body language. So when our guys come into the gym, I expect them to have positive body language. When we're sitting in a meeting, I expect them to sit up, acknowledge they're not leaning back in their locker. When someone's talking to them, when they're in class, they're not falling asleep. When they that is on our team. If I was running a business, I would expect them to like engage with the customer as soon as they came in. We'd have all these different things that express my positive body language, right? So what we do with our guys is I go, okay, this is tough. This is not tough. And we make a list. Right. And so we knock all those out. It gives me a chance to clarify. And then we go, okay, passionate is choosing extra work. I think passion is displayed in the extra, right? Everybody practices for 2 hours a day in basketball. Everybody shows up to work that's any good at all, right? You go to work. So what are you doing beyond that to give yourself an advantage? That's what I think passion is.
What I like about this, I've thought a lot about core values, putting core values in place. And then I talk a lot about, okay, like who we are, like truly who we are like our identity is our values and then the actions we take.
Yes.
But the connection to, okay, let's define our values and the specific actions we will take directly connected to those. And like as a company, we have our core values clarified and we have some phrases on the back end of those as well. But those phrases, I think, are like, I think I want to use what you're saying here is the actions we're going to take are those phrases related directly to the core values. I think that's the twist I'm going to change to our process is, okay, here's the core value, but this is specifically what we're going to do as a company. And this is absolutely required. This is the expectation when we hire or we'll fire for these, who we work with, our contractors, whoever we're engaging with, this is the expectation. So just again, I appreciate the process to help us putting core values are hard to put into action.
Yes.
So getting specific about it, I think is so important. And those two examples you gave are absolutely great.
Well, and that's your culture too. So it sets your process and it's your culture is just your day-to-day behaviors of your team. That's your culture. Well, you can call it whatever you want. You can put different signs up, but it's how do your people act day in and day out. Right. And so when you identify them and you get clarity around them. So if I know positive body language, right, is what tough is, then whether I'm in the weight room, I'm in a meeting, I'm in class, I'm at home, I know what that is. And I can talk about the different ways we're going to display that. If I'm in a business, if I'm in the marketing department, I can talk about what it looks like in marketing. If I'm in sales, I can talk about what it looks like in sales. If I'm in customer service, I can talk about what it looks like in customer service. But I first have to have clarity around what tough means, right? Yeah. And if we don't ever have that conversation, then that's where we just like, if everything becomes important, then nothing is, right? So we've got to decide, like, what are we going to value here? Chick-fil-A is the best example. Chick-fil-A values customer service and their faith, right? They say, my pleasure every time, and they're closed on Sundays.
Yep.
Clear as a bell.
And look at the results they could get, the perceived results they could get, the numbers. They could increase sales instantly by 15% or whatever that math says if they just open on Sunday. But they know what they stand for. That's who they are. By the way, they may not do that because the ripple effect of maybe their customer base, maybe their employees, there's all kinds of other dynamics, because now all of a sudden they would change the culture and be going against the one thing that they said is we're going to respect our employees Sundays. We're going to respect our customers Sundays, even if they might not respect themselves. Like, that's what we're going to do. So that's a great example. So the other topic, and you talked about self-awareness, and I think your own self-awareness can help lead to the action you take in your core values. But you talk about self-leadership and team leadership a lot, right? That's a theme that you kind of talk about. Tell me the difference of those two things, and where do we start?
Yeah. So when I wrote the classes for Centerville, when I was teaching leadership, we had foundational leadership and we had transformational leadership. And so foundational leadership, I think you have to start there. I mean, one, because if you're all jacked up, we don't want you influencing other people. Like, we need to get you right first, right? We need to understand, have some clarity about who we are, and be able to show that we can lead ourselves effectively. And so I think that is all. I mean, it's self-awareness and courage are probably the two main things. But then I think you got to establish some personal standards to go along with those. So that is self-leadership, and we want to do that first in order to.
How do we do that? How do we develop that? So I agree with you 100%. Like, we need to become like, we need to lead ourselves first, and for us to get to have the authority, not even authority is the wrong word, but just to get the opportunity to lead others. If we're not taking it serious to lead ourselves, we're probably not ready for that. We're not ready for the transformational leadership. How do we build our skills around foundational leadership or self-leadership?
I mean, what we did, we just dove right into self-reflection. The number of people that don't slow down and take the time to self-reflect is staggering. And I was working mainly at the time with the classes with teenage kids. So they're not slowing down. They're not getting quiet, because anytime somebody's not talking to them, they're on their phone, right? I think we have to shut off the outside noise some so we can actually hear our thoughts. We're so polluted with everybody else's voice that we have no idea what our voice says. And so the first thing I do is just try to get people to slow down and take time, whether that is just sit outside for 10 minutes and think, whether it's meditation. We meditated every day in my leadership class. I meditate daily. I prayer, whatever works for you, but you have to establish some sort of quiet, in my opinion. That's my morning.
I have not talked a lot about this. So I've done meditation. I'll do meditation occasionally. Every morning I'll do prayer, like I'll do quiet, but like in the evenings, if there's, if the kids are out of the house or there's nothing really going on, like, it's just so easy to go to the phone or do other things. Right. But I always am telling myself, I need the quiet. And I love the quiet. I just have to go do it though. But I haven't talked about it a lot. And society right now is not doing this. Like, no, not just kids. Kids have phones, and like there's no quiet there if it's not being taught to them. So I think what you're doing is great. But adults aren't doing it either.
No, not at all.
Maybe a little bit, but just in generally society, it is going in the absolute wrong direction because of our phones or media or whatever it is. So like, how do I build that habit, or help me start something there? How would you tell me, or what would you tell our listeners there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way, habit building, Atomic Habits is a great book, obviously, to help with some of that stuff. The way I think about it is like, I think of figuring out what a keystone habit for you is. Keystone is kind of like, the top thing of an arch, that rock at the top of an arch that kind of holds everything together.
Yep.
And building off of that. So for me, it's exercise. Like I'm going to exercise every day. Like it's part of who I am. Maybe it's eating breakfast. And then I think you start tying things to that, whatever that keystone habit is. So for example, if it's breakfast, then 10 minutes after breakfast, I sit quiet with no phone, no TV. I pray before I eat breakfast, right? I journal. I think journal's another one that I think people need to do some sort of a practice on reflection on, especially once you identify your values. I think it's really important that you reflect on, did I live this or did I not? How can I get better? But I think tying it, for me, morning is my time. And that started when I had young kids, because I knew I didn't want to take away time from them. Like I don't golf. Part of the reason I never started golfing was because I couldn't justify 4 hours away from my family when my kids were little. It didn't make sense to me. And so I wasn't going to take that time for personal development either. I want to spend that with them. And so I just started getting up earlier and earlier. And so that morning block.
And you have to, because once they're up, chaos starts. You're not going to get that quiet time, right? So, and I what I like is you didn't say, so quiet time, we need quiet time, but there's a lot of different ways to do that, right? Reading, but even reading is bringing things into the mind, but just quiet time, meditation, prayer, journaling. I think those are all great exercises to have, but even broader than that keystone habit, because I think over time, I'm sure what you did, Brooke, is you've identified exercise as your keystone habit. But then, maybe you did that for a quarter or 6 months or a year, but they're like, okay, what can I add to that? And you started stacking these habits on top of each other, but that keystone habit doesn't go away. And if you do this in the morning and like I have a morning routine and I go through like exercise, prayer, going to walk with Marsha most days or run, whatever. But if I do those things by 7 a.m., I'm winning the day. I've won the day already, right? And then the rest of it, things just fall into place. So I would just encourage people, don't try to do all the things Brooke's talking about, all the things I'm talking. Do one thing. If you're not doing any of those, pick your keystone habit and do it. So self-reflection, quiet time. We were talking about how to build this foundational leadership. What else should we be doing?
So, I think once you get some of that self-awareness, the reflection is important. You need to figure out why was toughness important to me? As I sat there and I reflected, I need to understand why is that something that I value? I appreciate it in other people, and it really bothers me when I don't see it in other people. I really have trouble with relationships, with friendships, with interacting with people that don't display any of it or the opposite of it. And so I think reflecting and figuring out that, for me, I think it came from my dad. And I think a lot of times it does. The exercise I do when I'm helping people through these is ask people to think about the three people they admire. And then why they admire them. What attributes do you admire in those people? Because we admire people for the same, just like we don't like people because they violate our values usually. That's the reason they rub us the wrong way. We admire people because they usually hold values that we aspire to have. That's why we admire them. And so thinking about my dad and what did he do consistently that made me think man, he is one tough dude. Right. And so, you just kind of go through that process and then you think about other values that really show up for you. And I think that leads you to a lot of clarity and appreciation for where that value came from.
So one thing that, first of all, I love the people that you admire because you inspire them. And it's because if you can look at someone's I want the things they want, but that's not what we're talking about here, right? It's who are they as a person? Are they clear on who they are as a person? Are they living their values, the actions they're taking? You see that if you admire that and you aspire to be like that person, then you're using that person or those three people to help you understand yourself better. That ties all the way back to the self-awareness. The other thing I think that's interesting is once you've identified these core values, I like the idea of the process. And I told when I talked to the leadership class of the high school students, especially as they're thinking about going off to college, is your network associations, who you hang out with, pay attention to that. And if you know your core values when you go to college and there's 3 or 5 people that you want to hang out with, but they're only aligned with one of your 4 or 5 core values, you just got to be careful because you become with whom you associate. So a little bit of a tangent there, but so as we build it, anything else, I guess, on building our foundational leadership, or if not, how do we then transition to be transformational?
I think the only thing I would add is the courage, and the courage to maintain that, because the hardest thing is to do. Consistently do. That's the hardest thing. Like I value integrity, but I don't know if I want to like that. I don't know. It would be easier if I didn't tell the whole truth in this situation. Right. Or I value toughness and positive body language, but I'm really tired this morning. Like I just don't feel like talking and communicating with people. And so I think that courage to consistently live that out is a big deal, especially really for everybody. We're all, like you said, we're all victims of who we associate with. And so aligning ourselves with people that are like-minded is really important. And I think that allows us to establish a personal standard. And I think the thing about personal standards that people miss is the confidence that it gives you. That day after day, like, yep, I showed up. I was tired today and I still did my workout. I still got up when my alarm went off. That's what I do, right? I get up. And so I think that reestablishes and reinforces my personal convictions.
Yeah, I think courage and discipline builds confidence big time. And you talk about confidence, just confidence versus humility. We can talk about that too. But before we jump to transformational leadership, because this is on my mind, through our last discussion, but then especially it's just coming out here, like the consistency, not consistency, the alignment of what I talk about in the purpose matrix and, self-leadership, knowing what you own, surrendering the outcome. Courage is one of my favorite words, building your core values, just the consistency or alignment in what you're talking about and what I believe is stronger with you than I think anybody that I've talked to about this topic, just the themes and the messages. So I just want to say I appreciate it. This stuff is like resonating with me big time. So we're switching to transformational leadership. So now we've started to earn the opportunity to lead others because we're starting to effectively lead ourselves, right? We're all on this journey. None of us are perfect self-leaders, right? But let's start. We're on the journey somewhere and we're earning the right to be leading others. How should we think about this? Maybe even differently than self-leadership. What's the difference or what should we be doing?
I mean, I think it is a big shift. And I think people get to it in different times because you have to make the shift to other people, to impacting others, where a lot of the self-awareness and self-leadership is about you. And as you go through that process, you start seeing how your impact is, what your actions are to impact others, because you've reflected on how other people's impact has affected you. And so it's kind of a natural transition, but I do think some people are still stuck on themselves and leading themselves. You do have to make that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You got to make that self-transcendence like shift to where, no, my impact on other people is really why I'm here and what I can do for people. And I think that's when we start thinking about not just making more money or winning games. We start thinking about what's the quality of life and the quality of experience and the impact that we're having with the people that are working for us or the people that we're leading. It all just, my favorite book with this is Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I think that I've used that for probably 15 years now. But just it starts with trust, and there's no, we can argue it. You can say what you want. It's about relationships and building trust. And so we're very specific with some different things that we do to build trust. And I think there are ways to build trust. It's not just a luck of the moment. Time is the biggest asset you have, time. And I think I spend a ton of time with our basketball guys, but most people in the workplace, they spend a lot of time together. But how intentional is it? What are you talking about? There's just a lot there where, I think vulnerability is a huge piece. We talk about laughing, crying, and suffering together. I think laughing is way underrated as a method to build trust. We spend a lot of time. Suffering usually isn't too hard. With a high school basketball team, we do that. And I think in work, it's not that hard either. You're solving hard problems together. I think you start appreciating that. I think leaders, from a leadership standpoint, we got to be consistent. when we're not consistent, I think it violates trust for people.
Yeah. Especially if we're not consistent in our actions and our words, I think, right? I want to ask the question on like, we need to shift to others. How do I know if I'm ready for that, or when do I do that? Like, is that just like you talked about Maslow's hierarchy there? And there's kind of this, okay, I have the basic needs met, or I have like, okay, I don't like, let's tie this to the workplace. All right. I'm doing fine. You know, I'm not doing this for money anymore. I need to look for a bigger purpose. Should I be looking for that, waiting on that, acting upon that? How do I know when I'm ready for this shift to transformational leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think I've been asked that before. I've thought about it, because I think the real answer, like the truth is, you get to a point where the pain of staying where you are is greater than the pain of changing. I think that's the real answer for everybody, because I think your ego drives you more than you want to admit. And you're not doing it for money, but you might be doing it for the boat, right? Like you might be doing it for some other stuff that allows
the perception of money,
yes.
The perception of others, and like, right. Yeah. There's like,
yeah,
the pain of staying, when the pain of staying is worse or more painful than the pain of the change.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's when it really happens. I think people fake it before that, and then they fake it and they're like, well, this is a better way to go. But I think when you make that, when that becomes like, all right, my whole life is just about me. At some point that becomes empty for everybody. And my message is, I'm just trying to help you see hopefully you can see that before you're on your deathbed.
And I think, right, because I think this is a hierarchy. I think there is a process. There are phases to it, in my opinion.
I agree.
I don't think, I don't want to pick on people at different age. I don't think it's easy for a 20-year-old to be at the level you're at. Like, I think they have to go through the pain, and they have to go through what they think is right. And maybe a 20-year-old with all the right lessons, but I think there's a process to this. And no matter where you are in that process, it's okay. But you kind of graduate in these different phases and move on to the next phase, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think is, when we're younger or when we're in an earlier phase, however we want to say it, we tie this back to outcomes we're pursuing versus process, where the process, our values and our actions, right? And I think as we move into these different phases, again, whatever we want to call it, if we just do the right things, if we know who we are, we can be content with that. Whereas we can never be content with chasing things or outcomes, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's where I think it always ends up going back to those purpose, core values, and behaviors, because you can't have that consistency if you don't have those things. And so, like, if I don't have those, I don't have a foundation. It's kind of like, use the example of like a ship sailing at night and there's no lighthouse. We don't know where the land is. We don't know which way we're going. It's completely pitch black. I'm just in the middle of the ocean sailing around. But as soon as I see that lighthouse, I know that's where I'm going. And so I think that's what your purpose and core values do for you. And if you don't have that, what ends up happening is all these little other lighthouses pop up. Oh, that's a win. I'll go chase that one. And then another lighthouse pops up. Oh, that's a different win. That's more money. I'll go chase that one. And we just end up kind of being a prostitute for more wins in different ways. Yeah. Like we don't really know what we're chasing.
Brook, you're a thoughtful guy. By the way, I'll bring this up is before we started, I said I just kind of small talk, how are things going? And he's talked about how basketball has slowed down. It's a slow season. So I've just been focusing on quiet time and reflection. And you can see from Brook that just he's a deep thinker, right? You're thinking about this thing, this stuff, you're reflecting on it. But you've talked about purpose, and this is a big, this is a big question and a hard question maybe for people. And I think, I forget the phrase, but like the theme for your basketball team is just basically pursuing purpose or taking the actions to pursue purpose. I'm butchering that. You have it up on your screen, I think.
I do. But attack opportunities with purpose. Attack opportunities.
And I love that way more. Like, have courage to pursue your purpose, right? I mean, have the courage, attack opportunity. And I love the word attack. That's strong. How do you think about purpose for yourself?
I mean, I think of it as the reason God put me here. I think we're all put here for different reasons. I think we're all put here with different strengths. For me, I think of it as like, this is the little area that I was put here to try to help and increase and improve. And that is my calling. It's like, it's my pulpit, I would say. And so that's it.
What I like about that, the way I think about this, and again, there's so much alignment, is you might have purposes for yourself. Okay. So like I want to be healthy, or I want to win the day, or whatever it might be. But then as you go through different phases, you might say, I'm okay. That transforms to, I want to have purpose for others. I want to impact others. I want to serve others. And when you do that, when you make it bigger than yourself, I think there's more conviction and more courage, and you can attack it. But then the next level, I think, is spiritual. And I think if you can put, if there's a purpose, if you think what you're doing is for God, it's a whole nother level. I think there's different levels. There's self-leadership, there's transformational leadership for others, and there's whatever you want to call this. But the bigger you can make your purpose, the more courage you're going to have to attack that purpose. So I couldn't be more in alignment with what you're saying. We're maybe saying it in different ways, but I think that's fantastic. And I think, like, to our listeners, you are uniquely skilled at something. You are passionate about certain things. What is that? Think about those two questions right there. Forget about the money for a second. Like, there's some disagreements on money in this too. Is like, I think if you know what you're uniquely skilled at, the gifts that God gave you and what you're passionate about, you will figure out money. You will figure out that piece of it. Don't focus on it, right? There's strategies and whatever, but if you figure out those two things and think about those two things, I think it'll guide you from a professional purpose. And I'm not saying this isn't just a professional purpose. This is broader, right? All these things should align. So I don't know what your reaction to that is, or how you feel about it, or if you agree or disagree, but I think the bigger we can make it, the more courage we have to act on it.
I completely agree. Two of the things when we're helping people find purpose, or businesses find their purpose, is it's got to be bigger than you, and it's got to be future oriented, right? So it can't just be about you. It's not like when I was coaching, it can't be winning a state title. It's got to be bigger than you, and it's got to have a future orientation to it. There's a little formula that we use, like, I exist to do something, like a verb. Who am I trying to impact with that? Like what, like other people, who other people, family, it could be anybody. And then what's the impact that you want? So mine is to inspire others. So inspire would be my verb, to inspire others, other people to, and my impact is strive for excellence over success. So to inspire others to strive for excellence over success. And so for me, that is, excellence is the God thing. Excellence, I think that's who God created you to be, the best version of you. Success is your comparison with other people, which is what society calls you to do.
Yeah. I talked about the alignment. So mine is to inspire and educate. I have that in there, but to inspire and educate others to live their God-given purpose, which you talked about, that tie of excellence. Like, but it's, and I don't, honestly, that's what drives me. And here's the other thing. I know that's what I want to do. I don't know what that means. I don't have the whole strategy figured out. I just know if it feels right, I want to move in that direction. And that's what guides me, right? Then there's vision and there's all kinds of other things. But if I keep that in front of me, then I think I'm going to have the courage to act. And I can, that allows, like, that gives the big thing you talked about, it, ego. Knowing what that is allows us to get ego out of our way, because we are all egotistical people in some way. Like we are. It's just, we are human beings. So we all have an ego to different levels. But the more we're clear in what we're doing, will help guide us to make the right decisions. So I appreciate that discussion. That's a deep discussion. I've thought about this stuff a lot. I could tell you could handle it, like, just, and you're a deep person. So I appreciate it. How do you help me work through excellence and success, and how you define that?
Yeah. So excellence is the best version of yourself. That's who God created you to be. The best version of yourself. That is free from, unattached to everybody else. Detached from man's approval is a little phrase I love to say, detached from man's approval. That's what I'm talking about. The best version of you. Success to me is your comparison with other people. How much money do you make compared to me? Well, I make more, so I'm successful. I scored more points in this game than your team did, then I'm successful. I've got more wins in my coaching career, so I'm successful. I'm the CEO instead of the, branch manager, so I'm more successful. Right. And so I just think like it makes me sick. And this is what I think your purpose has to do for you. It makes me sick to think about that and to think about my kids or the kids I coach to live their life under the weight of that comparison. So I want to help them live free from that. That's really where the purpose is.
And I think if you get clear on purpose and what excellence really is, and you separate from success, you surrender the outcome. There is so much freedom in that, right? That's there's so much freedom in knowing who you are and pursuing and taking the actions to align with that. The other thing I'll say that's interesting is if you would ask me 10 years ago or 15 years ago, my purpose statement to help others succeed. And then as I thought about that and journaled on that over time, there's a reason that changed, right? It's like, but I was in that earlier phase and I had to learn that and figure out what that meant. Like I'm not the same person I was 10 or 15 years ago and things have changed. So that does, wherever you are, you can learn from just this discussion and others and keep growing and keep moving in that direction, right? Keep trying to figure this stuff out. Brook, if you step back and reflect, this has been amazing. I mean, one of the deeper discussions I've had, but I really appreciate it. I thank you so much for being just transparent and vulnerable yourself. I think hopefully our listeners, hopefully you can feel that and the impact it can have, because now you're thinking, I want to learn more about this guy. I want to see what he does, the coaching he offers, the talks he does. But if you step back and reflect, the impact you're having, what you're doing, the alignment of your actions with your purpose and your values, how does what you do, how does it make you feel?
I would say proud. I don't use that word very much, but I feel aligned and in my calling, in my purpose. So I don't really have much anxiety or fear or any of that stuff. I'm confident I can navigate whatever's coming my way. But it's really related back to that purpose, because that I feel like as long as I'm operating in that, it's just such a better way to navigate life and to live. So, I'm very grateful. I think that's a big part of it. I feel grateful that I've had the experiences that I've had, and I've had, the people that have impacted my life that have led me to this point. But hopefully I'm just trying to do my part and serve my role as well as I can. So the comment about anxiety and fear, I think, is so important, because I would agree with you that when I'm clear on what I'm doing, we have a lot going on. We're trying to do different things. You have a lot going on. You're coaching, speaking, leadership class, writing book. You have a lot going on, right? But you don't have anxiety and fear. And it goes back to this freedom discussion that you brought up earlier, is when you know what you're doing, why you're here, what excellence means to you, if you can separate and surrender the outcome, like if you're having anxiety issues or your fear of acting, if you can separate from the outcome and know you can only control what you do, you can only control who you are, and you have to separate from the outcome. If you can do that, there's so much freedom in that. And if you struggle with anxiety, I would encourage you to focus. Don't dwell on the past and what has happened. Yes, think about the future, but don't get caught up in the results and what success looks like. Think about what you're going to do and the actions you're going to take. And it can be very freeing for you, and it can release that anxiety. It can help you sleep better, all those different things. I just think it's an important topic that, you have two individuals on here that are trying to do a lot of different things. We're busy, but that doesn't mean you can't be content and avoid anxiousness. Yeah. I always come back to just living in the present. Like that's really, there's no anxiety in the present. There's no depression in the present. And the more we can get ourselves to the present, the better off we are. Also, the more effective we are. The excellence only lives in the present.
Yeah.
It doesn't live.
Have you read the book, The Power of Now?
I have.
Yeah. I'm actually rereading it right now, and it's like, it's deep. I'll tell you that it's deep.
Yeah.
So make sure you're ready. But if you want that and you want to think about the presence and just the things that Brook just said, that book is a phenomenal resource. So if you read it and you're like, it lost me, give it 3 or 5 years and then go read it again, because it's really impactful. And it's like the power of right now, because it's all we have. And I'll tell you right now, I'm having a blast. This was so much fun, Brook. I appreciate, again, we could go on for hours. There's so much alignment in our messages. So I appreciate that. And just coming on and supporting what we're doing. Brook, how can people find out more about the Learning Leader or your books or whatever you want to direct them?
Yeah, so the work I'm doing with Ryan Hawk and the Learning Leader team, that's just at learningleader.com. Ryan runs the Learning Leader podcast, and we do a lot of work with businesses and corporations and helping with values, but also with just leadership. We go into companies and help with culture development and then help drive it through the company. And then for me personally, if you go to Blue Collar Grit is my website, where I do some small group private consultation with some of this type of stuff. Some of the stuff I've taught with my leadership classes. I've worked with some teams on kind of the similar things, but happy to help wherever I can. But my books are available. Books are available on Blue Collar Grit if you're interested in those.
Brook, thanks so much. I would just encourage you, check out the Learning Leader, Blue Collar Grit. Check out Brook, find him, follow him. Check out his books. They're absolutely fantastic. Those things will be in the show notes. So if you scroll down right now and find those show notes, you can see those links as well. Do us a favor, leave us a review as well. Brook, I again, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it so much. For the Purpose Matrix, signing off.